All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode. You know what? Let me adjust my camera just a little bit. I just noticed it was cockeyed in the background there. But Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with Matthew Samoohi. Matthew, welcome. So awesome to have you today.
Amazing to be with you today, Kevin.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's interesting. You and we originally met at this event that took place a few years ago. I mean, man, time flies. It's been almost 3 years since that event uh, in Austin that some pretty cool mutual friends hosted. It was hosted by like Jesse Elder, Ron Lynch, Jordan Hall, Nick Peterson, and Travis Sager was there virtually, and so was Alan Sultanic. And I didn't know Alan, but I knew all the five other guys. And when I found out they were doing this thing, I was like right away, I was like, man, I am in. And I don't know what your experience was, but that was a pretty dang awesome event, man.
It was phenomenal. Met a ton of great people. It's definitely amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what's cool when you go to small curated, because like if I remember, there was only like somewhere between 30 and 40 people there. It wasn't a big event,
Right.
but it was a really highly curated event. The right people were there. And for me, being a guy who facilitates relationships, I for years I have been intentionally putting myself in rooms like that where I just get to hang out and have conversations with the right people for the right reasons, you know. And that was a good example of that. And that's where you and I met. And then I recently saw something you had posted on Facebook, and I'm like, man, I need to reach out to Matthew and see if he'd be up for doing an interview. And here we are. So I'm just really excited to have this conversation with you, Matthew. And what I want to do is I want to start off by just turning it over to you, so
Sure.
we can set a little bit of context. I'm going to have you share a little bit about what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work that you get to do through your business and the impact you're making, Matthew.
Sure. So I run a recruiting firm, staffing firm that mainly focuses on staffing international talent for small businesses in the United States, where I use various hiring methodologies like top grading and other tricks and things that I use to go and vet top tier talent at roughly 80 to 90% off of the cost of what you'd pay domestically.
Wow.
Uh, the difference between what I do and what others do is mostly I don't just staff basic level virtual assistants or, customer support reps. I go a little bit beyond. We could get you that, but
Okay.
the person that I will staff for you and what my agency generally focuses on is the top 1% of that particular talent pool. And
Okay.
other roles as well, project managers, operations directors, video editors, media buyers. The world becomes flat when you hire virtually. There are intelligent people everywhere, and it's my job to find those missing puzzle pieces and put them in your company. So
Very cool.
it is
Very
what I
cool.
do.
So how did you get into doing this kind of work, Matthew?
Right. So, about 7 or 8 years ago, I heard of a conference going on in Austin. It was a Maverick Next conference run by Yannick Silver and
Okay.
Dmitry Kozlov. And when I heard about it, I heard about it through a friend of mine that I met. His name is Larry Yu. And I was at the time beginning to work with my sister. She was running a travel agency where we were taking hundreds or thousands of people per year to Cuba. And at the time, my sister's agency was growing, and I went to this conference to learn new skills. And I took the chance, went to the conference, didn't know much about it, but I, flew to Austin and because of that conference and the people that I met there, particularly someone named Zion Kim, he was at that Maverick Next conference.
Okay. Okay.
He taught me about international hiring, and I took that skill, and from there, I was able to build it up over the course of almost a decade. I mean, it's been 7 or 8 years to, you know, span a wide range of hires. So it all really comes down to that one event, and then the subsequent events that Yannick, threw and Dimitri threw
Uh-huh.
that allowed me to gain this skill set and be able to bring this to the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was that event, Matthew, was it one of Yannick's underground events? Because you mentioned Dimitri too. Was it tied in with his underground events?
I don't believe it was tied in with his underground events.
Okay.
I think it was a little bit after that, maybe
Okay.
like 2 or 3 years after that. This was like a Maverick Next event in Austin, Texas. So it was for younger entrepreneurs.
Oh,
And at the time, I qualified to go and I got accepted. I went and that first conference, that first Maverick conference was just a game changer for me.
wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
So where were you at coming into that conference, Matthew? I mean, did you already have a business, or where were you at coming into that conference?
Yeah, so coming into that, I mean, this is a crazy story. I I was in the second or third year of college. At
Okay.
the time, I was contemplating dropping out because I just didn't really see a path there for me, and I didn't want to continue further. That conference that I went to, that Maverick conference, was actually during my pre-calculus finals. I
Oh,
essentially opted out of taking my pre-calc finals because I already knew that the actual, grade was not going to be that great. I was falling tremendously behind in that
okay.
class. So at the time, I had the opportunity to help grow this travel agency that my sister started rapidly growing. I took the risk. I flew out to Austin. I met all these different people, and those skill sets were the skill sets that, allowed me to help her grow and then
Wow.
yeah, further grow my career as well.
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. So if you look, so at the time you didn't even have your own business.
Nope.
How long after that event did you launch your current business?
Scale Smartly was launched, I believe, maybe 4 to 5 years after that
Okay.
event.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So were you helping your sister with her business from that event on through until you launched your own business? Is that what
Well,
you were?
actually, I was able to help her,
Okay.
and through the back of the success of that, I was able to help another digital marketing agency. So this is a completely different business.
Okay.
This was in 2019, actually. There was a rapidly growing digital marketing agency run by a guy named Benjamin Arabov. He took me on to be his operations director. And from there, I was able to apply all the skills that I gained, base level, working with my sister and all the skills I learned from all these different conferences and helped him scale his way out of the business. So there was a point in time where he had this 20-person team that was pretty much almost self-managing itself.
All right.
Presently, it has its own CEO, and the reason why he wanted it self-managed was because his father's a big-time jeweler, Jacob the jeweler, and I eventually helped him staff some people as well.
Yeah.
But the work that I was able to do at that time, particularly hiring international talent that are A-player grade, allowed the owner, Benjamin, to kind of step out of the day-to-day and be able to manage two things at once, which was heading up his father's jewelry company and also running Grow Enrollments, which is the agency. Yeah,
Very cool. Very cool.
yeah.
So if you look at this relationship that, well, I mean, you mentioned actually two relationships because you mentioned Yannick, but you also mentioned Larry, who was the one that kind of told you about Yannick and what they were doing there. So you can look at either one of these relationships, but I want you to think. I mean, and you kind of shared some stuff, but I want to ask this question a little bit different way because what it's an example where you you got to make a really big impact. And you also know that that would have never happened if not for the relationship that you had with Yannick or the relationship that you had with Larry. And like, what's an example of that just really came from these relationships in your life?
The reality is that had I not gone to that conference in Austin, and had I not skipped out on my pre-calc finals, and had I not done what I had done, the reality is that I would not likely have heard of international, hiring from Zion, who was
Yeah.
at that conference. And then the skill sets that I gained, and it was more than just hiring. I learned a lot from that network, a lot. But if it wasn't for that, like there's zero way that on my own, I feel like I could have just figured those things out and built them into my sister's business, then later on into Ben and Jacob's business, and then later on into my own.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a right place at the right time moment. I
Yeah.
don't think that if I wasn't there, I mean, it was so far out of left field when I first got told that, I could do such things. I was like, what? You could hire someone over there? Like, that's possible for that cheap? That's insane, And then shortly after, yeah, was able to start.
Wow. So I don't usually do this, but I think it's so fitting because I first met Yannick back in 1999 at a Dan Kennedy seminar that and this was like before Glazer Kennedy ever became an organization or anything, when Dan Kennedy used to do his own seminars. And I met Yannick at this event that Dan was hosting at the Embassy Suites on Camelback in Arizona. And Yannick had just came out with this product called Instant Sales Letters. It was a digital product. He was selling it online. He was doing really well with it. And he shared at that conference that Dan put on. And it got me thinking, because at the time, I owned a cleaning and restoration company right here in my hometown and stuff. I was just a local business, but I thought, like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could use the internet for my business somehow? And instead of just having a local only business, I could have a nationwide or maybe even worldwide business. Wouldn't that be something? And I ended up starting probably one of the ugliest websites on the internet called getmoldsolutions.com. And we ended up we launched that website in 2000, and by 2003 that website was producing between 12 to 15,000 a month for the company and stuff. And in 2003, Joe Polish and I, because Joe he was the guy that was helping me with that business, the cleaning and restoration company. He was like, hey, why don't you come down here to the annual seminar that he hosted every year and show everybody what you're doing with your website? And I'm like, all right. And he was like, and before you come, be sure to document what you do and put it into a course, because once people see you, a certain percentage of them are going to want your help, and just be sure you're ready to give that to them. And so I didn't know. I had never spoken public before. I had never done anything like that before. But I did about a 60-minute presentation at Joe's annual event. I just said at the end, I just said, hey, if what I shared resonates with you, if you feel like I might be able to help you, here's what that would look like. Here's what the investment is. And we made 35,000 in sales worth of that course. And I was just like, wow. And I will say, over the next 12 years, we went on to sell $16.1 million worth of that course. And I did almost 600 strategic partnerships, but that all stemmed from Yannick planting that seed in my mind years ago, and kind of like what happened for you. It planted this seed that you're like, wow, I didn't even realize that would be a possibility. Who would have ever thought I could do something like that, and years later, both you and I are better for it because we've had the fortunate experience of running into Yannick, and what a powerful testament that is to the power of relationships and stuff. And so, for anybody listening to this, Matthew, that's just like, man, Kev, I really like Matthew. I like what he stands for. I like how he shows up. How can they find out more about you and the work you guys are doing, the impact, any websites, any resources that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is Scale Smartly, so SCALE Smart
Ah,
LY.co.
okay,
And you can reach out to me at Matthew@scalesmartly.co. It's my email,
okay.
LinkedIn, or my Facebook. It's Matthew Samoohi, Samoohi.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. Any last thing you feel led to share before we call it a wrap, Matthew?
I really do believe that investing in relationships is the most important thing one can do in life and in business. And I'm just honored that you have a podcast that celebrates that and really puts together great dialogues and conversations like this. And it really did make me reflect that if it wasn't for that one connection or that one conference
Yeah.
uh, years ago, that I wouldn't have been able to do what I'm doing right now, and also that it impacted you in a similar fashion as well by the
Yeah.
same person. So definitely wanted to end off on that note.
Absolutely. Well, Matthew, once again, thanks so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I really appreciate you.
Yes, thank you, Kevin.